Hello, listeners. Welcome to Courage Talks. Special guest today is Rajat Mathur. More than 3 decades of corporate experience, especially in the finance industry. Head of HR, has managed and led multiple talent practices. More importantly for me, he's a runner and ultra marathoner, mountaineer, and an extremely nice person at heart. Welcome, Rajat.
Thank you so much, Hetal. Looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks a lot, Rajat. And everyone in the corporate circle would obviously know you what you are today, but not many might know about your growing up days. So why don't you just take us back memory lane, childhood days? Where were you born? What are the earliest memories you have of growing up?
So, Hetal, I come from a services background. My father was in the army. And so a lot of the influence of my life is from the army. You know, limited resources, moving every 3 years, having to make new friends, going to different schools, at least in the initial years. And then when we moved
Yeah.
to a hostel, coming back, for a summer break to a completely new city, and again going out and making friends. So for us, a lot of our life was transitional in nature. And so different experiences, different cultures, all that has sort of come together to make me who I am. As a growing up kid, I think I was a little bit of a brat. I had my share of incidents, got into enough trouble through my growing years, did reasonably well academically. So those were the early years that I remember. If you were to ask my mom,
Right.
I think she'll have a lot more stories about how many times she had to hold my ear.
Maybe just for that, I might call her on my podcast at some point of time.
She'll have a lot of
Um,
stories.
what is typical about army kids is about not being able to retain friends, not able to have change company. A lot of people cry and bemoan about it that, I'm not able to stay in touch with my friends and all. Did you have sense of regret at that time growing up yourself as well?
I don't think so. I think it was almost part and parcel of life, right? You have friends and sometimes they move, sometimes you move.
Yeah.
And if there's ever an opportunity where your parents get posted in the same place again, it's a massive reunion and you basically begin from there. So I think that continuity sort of remained.
Yeah.
Even now some of my best friends are friends that spent a couple of years with me, in a location, and then, we were out of touch, and then we got back in touch, and the friendships have continued. So I think it's just part of our lives.
And I think being in the same network, you knew nothing better, right? I mean, all your friends were like you only.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, it has turned out really well. Like I said, I have some of my closest friends, people that I hang around with now, that are from my school days.
Wow, very interesting. What was the inspiring stories of your father that you still retain and remember? Can you share some of that?
I think more than stories, I think there are instances of things that he would do. So, for example, he was a very early riser. And in our house, even if you were there for the summer vacation, you still had to get up early in the morning.
Yeah.
There was no sleep in option that was in the house. Right.
Yeah.
So as a result, your body sort of grew tuned to it. I get up really early in the morning.
Yeah.
Your shoes always had to be polished. It was something, it was a discipline that he put for himself. It was a discipline that I carried now. And today I can't walk out of the house without having polished my shoes. There were times when we were younger that he would go off because there was something happening around national security, etc. And we would not see him for days. And then he would come back and, very, very, at a very high level, give us stories about what happened, etc. We were always in awe of it. We were always sort of saying, wow, this is the life that we want to be. At one point of time, I actually wanted to join the army.
Yeah.
But, fate had a different route for me. But, there are these instances that sort of he would do largely around discipline, around physical activity, around making sure that, he was commanding a unit. There were 500-600 people under him. You saw how he operated from the junior most individual to the senior most individual. You saw how he dealt with people. You imbibe that. So I think it's not courage stories. It's really behavioral things that you take away and then you try to role model the same behaviors.
Very true. One single trait that you have embraced from him, I'll just be very candid here. My ability to observe and see beyond what I see is something which I've honestly taken over from that. I mean, he used to emphasize, don't look, observe. And I kind of realize how much observation can tell you than just looking.
So there are actually two things that I think I've taken on after him. One
Mm-hmm.
is this thing about time.
Okay.
He was finicky about time.
Hmm.
If you said 8 o'clock, then you got to be there at 8 o'clock, right?
Right.
I picked that up, and it's something that has stayed with me. Time is my pet peeve. I absolutely focus on that. I think the second one
Right.
that he always said to me was, "Don't say no, try it." And he used to use a phrase that stuck with me. He would say, "What's the worst that can happen?"
Hmm.
And when you sort of look at
Yeah.
an obstacle, something to do, and you're worried about the consequences, in my head, I play this,
Mm-hmm.
what's the worst that can happen? And you realize, ke, zyada kuch nahi hoga. It's okay.
Yeah.
The consequences in your head are much more than the actual consequences. So, never say no, try it out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe you learn something. Maybe you won't like it. That's fine. But
Yeah.
try to karo.
No, no, I totally agree with you. And I remember the other quote that you cited from your father about saying yes first, karke dekh lo, right? And it stays with me. The other thing which kind of reflects very similar to what you mentioned, that what's the worst can happen versus death. And in one of the previous podcasts, I have a question coming up at the end where the guest asked me a question. He said, what drives you? What motivates you? Or what gives you the kick to do things all the time? And I just casually told him, I have no fear of death. I don't fear death. I believe that I have done a lot in my life. I don't live a life of regret. And that kind of gives me confidence that if I encounter death today, it's not going to shatter me, right? If I'm on the deathbed suddenly, it's not going to shatter me that, oh my God, I had to do this, I had to do this. And he told me something very beautiful. He said, if you don't have fear of death, that means you're fearless. That gives you an invincible power, that anyone can do anything to you, but you don't get rattled by it. And I said, yeah, that's probably reflects a lot. And I think very relates to similar to what you mentioned, that, what can worse happen? The worst is death, and death happens only once in life. Sooner or later, we're going to die, right? The very first truth in our life, the moment we are alive, is that we're going to die. And that's fine. So it's very.
You say that I had an encounter. So I'm a heart attack survivor, right? So I had a
Yes.
close encounter where I went
Yes.
and I just shook hands with Yamraj and came back.
Yes.
And the one big learning that I had, as I sort of reflect back on that, was that there is a paucity of time. You
Yeah.
have a finite amount of time only. What you do with that finite amount of time, and it's different for different people, but it is still finite. What you do with that in that finite time
Yeah.
defines who you are and what you're going to be happy with. So do stuff that you can, and try everything out. It's kept me happy for most of my life.
No, well said. And I'm definitely going to come to the heart attack, but it requires a lot of courage to do what all that you've done in life, Rajat. What's your definition of courage?
I have a broad definition that I will give you. For me, courage is the
Sure.
ability to stand back up. You get pushed down,
Mm-hmm.
something bad happens, something doesn't go to plan. Your ability to get up and continue living your life, for me, that's courage. In the
Wow.
mountains,
Yeah.
we say that it's about, pushing yourself when your legs start to say no. And
Mm-hmm.
that's about mental strength and mental courage.
Yeah.
In the boardrooms, in the offices, it's the ability to stand up and speak the truth when silence is an option that could avoid getting you into trouble. And again,
Yeah.
we don't do enough. For me, if you have the courage and you're fearless and you understand that, in most cases it can't really go bad, stand up and speak.
Mm-hmm.
Stand up and voice a view. Courage is not absence of fear. Courage is the ability to act when there is fear. For me,
Mm.
that's my definition of courage.
Beautiful.
I'm saying there are lots of times in your life where you're going to be faced with a situation where uh, you keep quiet and then it sort of plays in your mind all the time. That's when you lost
Mm-hmm.
courage to be able to say that.
Yeah.
You don't want too many of those instances coming back and constantly reminding you that you had an opportunity.
Who's been your role model for courage?
I don't have a persona. I see courage being displayed in various ways, and every time someone displays courage, they become my role model for the moment, right? Whether
Yeah.
you see someone sort of standing up and protesting because they don't agree with a decision, for me that's courage, right? Not all of us go out in the streets and protest for something which they're very passionate about. For me, that's a
Yeah.
definition of courage. You're in a boardroom and you say something that is not the most popular opinion. That's courage for me. So there are instances that will happen where someone will do something which is different, right? You've done a triathlon, right? You're an Ironman.
Yes.
For me, that's courage, right? To be able to push yourself to a limit where it's a very small percentage of people in this world that are able to do that. For me, and I read your profile and said, "Hey, Ironman, courage." It's not, you're my role model. The person who's spoken up against something that wasn't right. He's my
Yeah.
role model. He's my role model. That's my definition of role models. I don't have a person in mind that I sort of stick to.
Right. You have had a stellar career in corporate life, Deutsche Bank, Morgan Stanley, different roles, different geographies. What keeps you going at the workplace?
I love what I do.
Mhm.
I do a job that I hate to call it a job actually. I do something where I go in and something happens every day. And that something that happens is the writer. I go into work not to do the mundane answering my emails and doing my meetings, etc. I wait for those moments where something new will happen, something that will challenge you mentally, will get you to think, whether get you to make a decision. So for me, that's what excites me. On the days that and it doesn't happen every day, but on the days that it doesn't happen, you come back home saying, "What have I done today?" And yes, you've sort of done your 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours at work, but you don't feel excited about it. But if there was a challenge, even if you didn't do very well on that, that day you come back and feel that aaj kuch kara, aaj kuch hua, right? I've recently taken a step away from the corporate world. I've done 30 plus years in the corporate world, and I said, I need to do something different. I need to create something. I need to,
Yeah.
give back to society. So my teaching engagements have increased. But I'm really trying to
Right.
build something in the retirement space, which can enable people to have better retirement. So now that's my passion.
Any stories or any instances from your work days which remain with you, which got you a good story of courage? Maybe your own, maybe some of your bosses, your colleagues, some of the senior members at work that you have always looked up to. Any examples of theirs that what they did and kind of resonated strongly with you?
Yeah, I'll give you a story, but let me set context on this one. So I was an extremely impatient employee. I needed to see recognition come through regularly. And as you get more senior in your life, you don't get promoted every year. There are years where you don't get promoted. There was a year much later in my life where I thought I was getting promoted and I didn't get promoted. And
Okay.
it broke my heart. I was upset. I was listening, and I was like, why am I not got promoted? And my manager at that time actually noticed this, and he sat me down and he said something really beautiful. And he said, this is not a emotional reaction that you should have. It's a mathematical problem that you should realize. You've got 7, 8 levels in the organization. You're going to work for 30, 32 years. So you're going to only get promoted in 8 years. The balance, 24 years out of the 32 years, you are not going to get promoted. It's math, right? So this is your year when you haven't got promoted. It's okay. It's okay. And
Yeah.
I share this a lot with the students, and I say that, you got to sit back and be able to rationalize as to why sometimes things happen to you. And
Yeah.
for me, after that, the ability to sort of rationalize and say, hey, it didn't happen this year. It's fine. It's probably one of those 24 years. Really calmed me down in my ability to accept these things. So, that was a massive, massive learning for me. The
Yeah.
other incident that I'll just share this with you is I learned a lesson about control. So this was really, really early in my career. I think I was about 6 or 7 years into working, and I was going for a meeting with my boss. उस जमाने में this is 98 99 we had a Fiat, no air conditioning, no music system, nothing.
Premier
I was
company.
actually, this was the original Fiat
That's
73
right.
model,
Yeah.
I remember. So anyway, so I was driving
Yes.
and my
Yeah.
boss was sitting next to me, and he had at that point of time a Walkman, and he had it connected to his ears, and he was listening to the
Yeah.
Walkman, and I was driving, and we got stuck in a traffic jam. What do we do in a traffic jam? We sit there and we honk and we roll the windows and we use some words that
That
jam.
was our
And
music system, right? The horn was my music system.
the horn was the music system. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, so I was sitting there blowing the horn, rolling down the windows, yelling, and this carried on for about 15, 20 minutes. And he was sitting on the
Mhm.
side with the earphones on, listening to music. About 15, 20 minutes later, he sort of tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "What are you trying to do?" So I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Why are you blowing the horn? Why are you yelling at
It's
people?"
just world.
And I said, "I'm trying to clear the traffic jam." And he said, "And has it happened?" And obviously I felt very sheepish and I said, "No." So he pulled out one of the earplugs and he gave it to me and he said, "Put it in your ear and listen to music. Understand that there's some stuff that's outside your locus of control. Stop worrying about it." Right? At that point in time, obviously you aren't processing it, but later on, when you start to process it and you start to believe in this concept of saying, locus of control, is it in my locus of control? Should I worry about it or not? Half the times something happens, the weather's bad and you start to get worried. It's not in your locus of control. It's going to happen. You deal with it. Right. So stop worrying
Yeah.
about it. So when you start doing this, there's a lot of worry factor that comes down significantly. So,
Yeah.
those are two instances, partly funny, partly life learning lessons, but I reflect often on that and say, yeah, this works. There is a rationale to what is happening in life.
Yeah. No. When you mentioned about trying to control the traffic, I thought the better answer was trying to change the world.
You do. There are times when you do stuff when someone asks you why you're doing it, and you don't have an answer, and then you
Yeah.
know that even if you do it, nothing's going to change, right? Looking
Yeah.
out of the window, and I say this to my kids all the time. Stop worrying. If it's going
Yeah.
to rain, it's going to rain. Big deal. Chata leke chale jana. Stop thinking about
Yeah.
the weather. Think about the solution that you need, which is an
Yeah.
umbrella.
The
So
cloud's job is to rain. Our job is to hold the umbrella. It's simple
hold the
as that.
umbrella. Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
No, but the beautiful line for exactly what you mentioned is that what I repeat a lot is there are things in life that you can control. There are things in life that you can't. The sooner you know which one is which, the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's my locus of control story. Anyone who's willing to hear the story, I tell them this. Right. And if it makes a difference in your life, even if it makes part of the difference in your life, it's a
Yeah.
significant amount of load off your head.
Very true. Very true. Agreed. You mentioned about handling disappointment, and of course, it requires a lot of courage to handle disappointment. And a beautiful story that you mentioned about promotion, because I reflect back, I obviously didn't really cringe about promotion as such, but the mathematical equation that you mentioned is very amazing. I think the first time I realized it's so straightforward, and it's funny. I mean, in my strategy management class today itself, I was saying that ideal layer in an organization is 7, right? And that resonates with the 7th promotion, right? But I think the frustration which seeps in, I think midlife crisis, what a lot of people call, is when those 7 layers and 7 promotions have not got you to the CXO level, is where you start cringing and cribbing with life, because obviously you have not achieved what you would have aspired to, but your age has kind of caught up with you. And then midlife crisis hits you, and a lot has happened in your midlife crisis. Tell us about your running journey. I mean, what did those ultra marathons teach you, and what were those epiphany moments which remain with you during a run, which you would love to narrate about?
So I told you I grew up in a services family, and every day that we were at home, at about 4 o'clock in the evening, my dad would say, "Out, go play for 2 hours." It didn't matter whether we had exams. It didn't matter if there were guests coming, whatever.
Wow.
You have to go out of the house and play for 2 hours, right? So you grew up
Hmm.
in an environment where it was very strongly encouraged that you have to play. So through school, through college, I was very active. I swam, I played hockey, played a little bit of cricket, I boxed. I tried every sport that was possible to play at different
Yeah.
levels, some successful, some not so successful, some
Yeah.
pathetic. But the principle was go out and try it. If you like it, you like it. So that's how it happened. Running wasn't something, I mean, I ran cross country because it was mandated in school to run cross country, but I didn't necessarily sort of pick it up as a sport till much later. In 2007, it was 2007, we were at a party and there was this guy, and Mumbai Marathon had just started a couple of years before that. So there was this guy at the party who was talking about having run a full marathon. And everyone around him was going, wow, awesome, awesome. And in my head, I was sitting there saying, it's running. What's the big deal? Right? I had no clue that a marathon was 42 kilometers at the front. I said, marathon equal to running for a long time. So I said, what's the big deal? So on the drive home, I told my wife, I said, if this guy can run a marathon, so can I. And she said, sure, go ahead. So the next day in the morning, I got up early. I checked on the net as to what a marathon is. And it said 42 kilometers. And I said, and I was calculating in my head saying 42 kilometers means going to the office, coming back, going to the office and coming back. So four rounds. The office was about 10 kilometers. And then I found another link which said there's also a concept called a half marathon. So I said, okay, I'm going to run a half marathon. And that day I went out for a run. I ran about 1,000 meters, and then there was smoke coming out from everywhere because you were not used to it. You used to play regularly, but you were not used to running, right? You were comfortable exercising, but you were not a runner. That's how the running journey started. So it was more about trying to prove a point than anything else when it started. Very soon, I ran my first 21 in the first year itself. And then I graduated to running a full. And then I wasn't happy enough. So I said, hey, how about doing more than 42? So I was party to a race which runs across the Gobi Desert, 150 kilometers over 6 days. Then I started to do some crazy races, which where, it's only a 8-10 kilometer race, but it takes 4 or 5 hours to do because of the terrain. So all of that stuff started to happen. And then someone said, hey, you can swim and you know how to cycle. Why don't you start doing triathlons? So in 2014, I said, okay, running is passé. Let's try triathlon. So I started to do sprint races and then graduated to Olympic distances, etc. And I did triathlon. So that was that. At the same time, this whole business of climbing restarted. So I'd been trekking quite actively in my early life, but then I'd taken a corporate break. And so someone said, hey, we're trying to attempt to climb a summit. I said, sign me up. And I went and climbed that in 2008. And then every year I would go back and I made a deal with my wife saying, I'm going to take 2 weeks off. I'm going to climb. So that's how it all sort of came together. And over a period of time, I became obsessed, I guess, as most of us are when we start to run and do triathlons, much to the sort of pain of the family. But, your entire schedule then revolves around, I can't do Saturday night parties because I have to do a long, slow run on a Sunday morning, and all of that stuff started to happen. So that's how the journey started. For me, running was cathartic. For me, it was my me time. And the longer I ran, the more me time I had. So for me, I never ran in a group. I always ran alone. For me, it was my me time. It was my ability to think, process, solve a lot of my own issues while running or cycling or swimming. So it was something I used to look forward to every day in the morning.
Any injuries, any setbacks, any falls during your runs?
Broken wrist, shin splits, back injury, fell off the bike, hit a cow.
Is the cow alive?
The cow's alive. I was barely alive. So
I'm not worried about you. Tell me if the cow is alive. I hope cow ko kuch nahi hua.
Cow just came in and I had cleats on.
आपको तो सब पूछते हैं यार. काऊ का भी ख्याल रखना चाहिए.
So I had cleats on. Okay, and it came so suddenly that I was unable to disengage my cleats. And so it was one of those slow falls to the left that happened. Fell off a horse, broke my wrist. So I've had my fair share of injuries.
The reason I could not hold myself laughing, there are 2 absolutely amazing coincidences, okay? My running journey also started in a party, okay? I met this woman in a party in 2013 and she was not drinking. And I said, okay, why you're not drinking? She said, I'm going to run ADHM. I said, okay, what the hell is ADHM? It's Delhi Half Marathon. I said, can I run? She said, yes, you can run. 5 weeks from that party, I ran the Ital Delhi Half Marathon for the first time and I never looked back on my running after that.
Well, it's interesting. 5 weeks? 5 weeks? Wow.
Yes.
It took me 6 months to get to a half.
After a long time, I actually officially ran the TCS 10K, but I never ran a 5K or 10K before I doing a half marathon. And when I did a half marathon, I said I don't need to do a 5K and 10K anymore ever. But the
So
other reason I was laughing is your cleats. Oh my god! I had a wrist fracture before my first Ironman. It exactly happened because I did not disengage my cleats, and I fell on my left, and I tried to balance with my left wrist. It had a fracture 14 days before my Ironman. I still went ahead and did the Ironman. So I
wow,
was laughing
that's
when you
nice.
mentioned cleats. I said, "Oh my God, these cleats should be redesigned. Yeah, this is a big problem."
So the other very funny thing that happened to me was, when I started to run, I said, "What do you need? You need a pair of shorts, you need a singlet, and you need shoes and
Yeah,
socks." And you start to run, and then
yeah.
when you start to run long, you realize that you
If
need a
you're
little
building
bit
someone,
more.
you don't need half of that also.
And then I was in the US, and I saw a running store. And in
Hmm.
my head, I was standing outside saying, "Why would they have a running store? I mean, to sell shoes and shorts?" And I went in. And I was like a
Yeah.
kid in a candy store. You know, I came back to India with, three hydration belts and Vaseline and pain relieving Vaseline and headbands and, goggles which don't let your sweat come on your eyes. So I went through that whole experience. It was a fascinating
Wow.
journey.
Okay.
I still love to run. I still love to run. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's anything I can do early in the morning, I'd run.
Interesting. You said you obviously done trail runs as well. What's the most scenic or the most beautiful run which still remains in your mind?
I think the Gobi Desert run was a fascinating experience. You saw the real desert. You saw temperatures which went up to
Yeah.
54 degrees in the day, and your sole of your shoes would burn in the sand. And then in the
Yes.
nights, it went down to, 3 or 4 degrees. So, you saw fluctuation. It's barren, right? You don't see anything but sand. But
Hmm.
it's a fabulous sight to see. So that clearly is something that I love. I did something called the Singapore Midnight Run. I think a decade and a half
Okay.
ago. It starts at 11 o'clock at
Hmm.
night, and if you're a slow runner like me, you sort of finish in the dawn. But seeing
Yeah.
Singapore at night with no
Hmm.
traffic on the road is a beautiful
Yeah.
experience. Running
Yeah.
on, even in Mumbai, running on the ceiling, it's a beautiful
Yeah.
experience. Right? You've probably done
Yeah.
this many times. Every race has one or two of these instances. I was in Nepal. I was not running this race, but there's the Everest Marathon.
Everest Marathon. Yeah.
I was there, but I wasn't running it. I saw the race. And,
Hmm.
in your head, you're thinking, this is something that you'd love to do. Right? You need to be supreme fit, but, running through the mountain trails over there, a fabulous, fabulous experience to see itself.
You done running and you done mountaineering, you done trekking. How would you sell running to a mountaineer? How would you convince someone who's into trekking, who's getting this solitude experience, toughness, grit, courage, everything is already in mountaineering? How do you convince them to run?
Lighter shoes, flat road, easy to breathe, less
Yeah,
clothes, no
yeah.
backpack. 5 reasons.
Okay, let's flip it around. How do you convince a runner to go to the mountains?
Flat is boring. Try something else. I don't know. I don't know how I'll convince. I probably tell him, hey, it's going to be easy for you. Just come there. You're a runner. You'll be able to climb very easily. Uh, I think the flip side is a lot more difficult. I think.
Yeah. Let's change tracks. You have had your taste of entrepreneurship as well, and I'm sure the consulting experience that you had has been instrumental in kind of helping the students that you teach as well, right? So, what did entrepreneurship teach you, which 3 decades of corporate life might not have?
A couple of things. I think for me, probably my biggest learning was accountability. Right.
Hmm.
You are
Yeah.
accountable to yourself. So, everything sort of rests with how much ever you put in is what you will get out. So for me, that was my biggest one. I guess the other big learning at that point of time was that there is no safety net. You make a mistake, it will stay with you, it will impact you, it will impact you personally over there.
Yeah.
In the organization, you make a mistake, you got a boss who's going to cover for you. So for me, the fact that there was no safety net meant that you thought a lot more about your actions than
Hmm.
ever.
Yeah.
Third, I think, was the need to make decisions. You
Hmm.
can't pass the buck anywhere. The
Right.
buck stops at you. You need to make the decision, and therefore to that early point of accountability, and then be accountable for that. And I think the last
Right.
one for me was resilience. You don't have a paycheck coming through you every day or every month, right?
Yeah.
There are days
True.
where there's no income coming, and there are days where some income is coming, and there are days which you have it really good, and you got you got EMIs to pay, and you got things to deal with. And so I think the ability to sort of stay strong, stick to the plan, continue to do what you have to do in those times. I think for me that learning of resilience was important. So these 3 or 4 things have come together and again crafted how I behave in my life. Make the decision. It's okay. Deal with the consequences, but make the decision. And then obviously you start to think about safety nets and creating safety nets, etc. When I was on my own, I was relatively young. I had no financial backing, no financial staying power. So it was literally going out there every day to make sure that you earn a little bit of money.
The other interesting element which ties us together, we both have a book behind us. The only difference is that my book is about my dad, your book is about you becoming a dad. What's the most courageous thing that a dad needs to do when you see a kid growing up?
Back them up irrespective of what happens. So this is a different definition of courage, Hetan. For me, this courage is equal to sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes not hidden, but a parent will do what it takes to make sure that the child has the best experience that they can in their lives. That's my definition of courage of the father. Make it happen for them. Our parents did it for us. We should be
Yes.
doing it for our kids, and so forth. So for me, courage is equal to making things happen for them.
This is where I sneak in a few more personal questions. Any interesting story about your kids which you would like to narrate? Anything that remains very strong with you? It need not be courage, but something which you say, okay, this was my dearest moment of my child or whatever.
So there are some funny moments that again, so perception, story about perception. So my son was about 4 when we were taking him to see the Taj Mahal.
Okay.
He asked me, he says, so what's the Taj Mahal? So I said, it's a white building made of marble. So he said, well, he was very excited. We got off the cab and we got in and we got the first glimpse of the Taj.
Right.
And he stopped right in the middle of the road and he said to me, you were lying to me. And I said, why?
Okay.
He said, this is not made of marbles. So in his head, as a 4-year-old, he didn't know marble. He knew marbles.
Yes.
And his expectation was that the Taj would be made of marbles. Kanche. Right? So it's about perception, right? So, I saw the deep disappointment in his face after all the excitement about let's go see the Taj over there. So, there are learning experiences that you have with these kids that, my daughter's a climber.
I read that.
Yeah. So she also
Very
climbs.
proud moment for you to get her to the peak, right?
It's
Which one was that?
my excuse. It's my excuse to get to the mountains because whenever she's there, I say, "Oh, she's going there, for I'm going with her." So we were climbing a peak called Jagat Sukh. This is a year after my heart attack, and I was not allowed to climb beyond 4,000 meters. So I decided to become the base camp manager, and she was a 15-year-old then, and it took them 41 hours to get out, go to summit camp, get stuck in the summit camp. 4 people in a tent, freezing outside, snowing very heavily. And then they got a 7-hour window to go attempt the summit, and they went ahead and did that. You look at this, and I'm not boasting, but you look at a 15-year-old having the resilience to stay with it and to make sure that you get there and come. I have photographs of her when she came back 41 hours later. And by the way, I had no communication with her for 41 hours. So I was like a paranoid dad sitting on base camp. But you saw her and you saw what the 41 hours did to her physically. And you know how much she pushed herself to be able to get to that climb, to get to the summit and back. So, these are learning experiences that, if you look back and you say, if a kid can do this, then you've raised them right.
In the beginning of the podcast, I said I need to get your mother on this podcast. Now I have to tell you how to get your daughter as well.
Yeah, we could do a family podcast.
But 41 hours, and I'm sure you're not sitting and looking at Instagram out there, right? How did you spend those 41 hours waiting for your daughter to come down?
I spent almost all the 41 hours sitting outside my tent looking up. So from where I was at a distance, I could see the trail that goes to the summit. I could see that plane, right?
Yeah.
And for the first 30 hours, I couldn't see anything. We had no contact with them and they were stuck in this thing. So I was just sitting there watching to see when I would be able to see them. About 3:30 in the morning is when I saw the first headlight. And this is the second night. Right. So I stayed up the whole night. I stayed up the whole day. And then the second night, about 3:30 in the morning, I saw the first of the headlights, and I knew, because they were the only climbing team attempting that peak that year, that they were on their track. And then, of course, I stayed track. But I spent a very nervous 41 hours in camp.
I don't know, not many people would be able to do what you did, right? Just sit and wait, right? I mean, a lot of people would just walk around, take small steps.
I was doing
Some
that.
people would just make calls back home.
Yeah, there's no connectivity, right? So there's no mobile phone, nothing. You're basically just sitting there having cups and cups of chai, waiting for some news to come through.
And you didn't hold on to all your exploits and kept them to yourself. You actually created a Fightback Club. You created a community. You are trying to motivate others, and I'm assuming you continue to do that. What inspires you to do all that?
I think it started with the thought, Hetal, that there were a lot of folks like us who, because of their work that they were involved in or their corporate life, let go of their passions, their interests, or put them aside. It was the same time that you were growing your family, your kids had started to go to school, and you were working really, really hard in the corporate world. And when I started to share what I was doing in terms of climbing, in terms of running, I met a lot of people who said, "Oh, I wish I had the time to do it, or I wish I could do it again." And that then translated firstly into a loose bunch of about 16, 17 of us who got together and said, "Hey, we have to do a climb together." And then, we did a successful climb in 2009. And then after that, the word spread very, very quickly. Right? They were talking to their friends. They were telling people about their stories. And so suddenly there was a lot of interest. And since then, pretty much every year, there's always been a motley crew of 15, 17 people that would raise their hands and said, "Hey, I want to climb, or I want to try this, or I want to start running." And so that's how the genesis of the Fightback Club happened. Now I've got a bunch of about 70, 80 people on a WhatsApp group who I just message saying, "Hey, there's a climb happening," or "Hey, there's a trek happening." And sometimes I go, sometimes I don't. But there's always 15, 17 people that raise their hand and say, "We'll go." So that's how it is. And a lot of things happen, right? So there's a really senior guy who works in a bank, was an extremely heavy smoker, one of those 30 cigarettes a day sort of smoker. And he came on the climb, and he realized how unfit he was. A lot of the smoke came out when they were climbing. And he came back. He came back and he quit, right? And he didn't tell me that he'd quit. I met his wife at a mall one day, and she shook my hands and she said, "Thanks to you, he's quit smoking." For me, that was a massive win. You've done a transformational change without necessarily knowing about it, right? All I did was, "Hey, here's an opportunity, try it out." But it was a transformational change. And I still remember how thankful that wife was. I still see her face, and I still, for me, that's a massive, massive win as far as Fightback Club is concerned. There are lots of these stories. Someone who basically then started to focus on health, now very recently became a certified animal movement coach, right? From being a couch potato completely, right? So transformational stories that you hear about people, it makes you feel good.
Very true. A lot of courage is not physical, but it's mental. Displaying emotions is tough for us, right? Any instance that you recollect where you could not hold back your emotions and you cried, or you displayed your emotions right up front in public, not giving a damn about what people might think about what you were going through?
There are family moments, the kids graduating, etc. Those are moments that you always. There's an instance up in the mountains. We were attempting this peak, and we were and we've been climbing for 6-7 days, right?
Yeah.
We were 200 meters short of the summit, and there was a crevice between us and the summit that we had no way across. Imagine 7 days, we had really pushed ourselves, etc. it's the summit is really close. It's just 200 meters. It'll take us maybe 45 minutes to an hour to get there if the crevice wasn't there. But this crevice had got created
Right.
and we had to turn back. To be able to say at that stage, saying, safety first, let's turn back. It's okay. This mountain will be there. We can come back again. Needs a lot of courage. And there were people that were attempting it for the first time who had sort of trained really hard. And to get them to sort of turn back and say, it's okay, let it go. I think for me, that's courage. So, that's a story I remember very, very vividly also.
You, of course, have trained and coached and mentored a lot of people. Anyone who you mentored who has really, really made you proud?
Oh, a lot of them. A lot of them.
I just want one. I just want one story.
So there's this kid I hired out of school, business school. I was very impressed with her and I hired her. And when she joined, she really struggled.
Mm-hmm.
She really struggled. So the first 8 months were horrendous. And there was a point in time where I sat her down and I said, you are trying really hard to lose your job, right? It came to that. And, I'd sort of taken on the rest of the team and I said, this kid is good, let's hire her. I don't know what happened after that conversation. She got a new manager and she really turned things around. Today, she's the head of HR of a mid-sized financial services firm, doing remarkably well. For me, that conversation of letting her know, has paid great dividends. We still speak twice a week. She's in a different organization. We still speak twice a week or relatively regularly. But she's done phenomenally well for herself. So for me, there are a number of these who have done very well. I've got a number of heads of HRs now who at some point of time have worked for me. These are proud moments. For me, anyone that sort of worked with me and now runs their own shop, that's victory.
Wow. There's a concept of failure resume. You want to highlight a few lines in your failure resume online?
When you say failure resume, things that didn't work for me?
Yeah.
I think the outdoor adventure company that I used to run was a project from the heart. Right? It wasn't a head project, it was a heart project. We ran it for a few years. We put a lot of money into it. And then the dot-com bust happened. And we went belly up. I don't call it a failure, but I think it was a lack of maturity that sort of resulted in ending a dream project of ours. Multiple instances of climbs where you haven't been successful. Again, I don't call them failures. They are great learning experiences. I always wanted to do an Ironman. The heart attack sort of interfered with that. So, I've trained. I've done Ironman in a mock Ironman at home. I don't have the Ironman badge or medal. I consider that it's not a failure, but it's a missing in the bucket list thing.
Is that same doctor stopping you from the Ironman? The one who's been your governor all along?
In fact, I've had the benefit of a really good doctor who says, prove that you can do this and I will give you a little bit more leeway to do something else. So, a year after
400 meters per year, right?
400 meters every year since 2019. And I've been climbing since I've reached just shy of 6,000 meters now.
So you have permission now to climb Mount Everest?
Not yet. I'm still about 2 kilometers short on that one. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. But your ability to sort of push yourself and keep coming back is something that only you as a persona can define for yourself. Limits are what you define for yourself.
So, you're in the HR function and HR obviously involves recruitment and hiring. And many times HR managers talk about hiring is more about rejecting than selecting. If you're able to cross out the people who are just not aligned with the organization norms, it becomes easier to look at the leftovers and pick the best among the leftovers. It happens at times, right? In the angel investment space, we have our misses, right? Companies which we let go thinking that they are not great. We kind of rejected them on certain parameters and they turned out to be success. Any particular candidate or individual that you remember who came on to you as for an interview, you rejected and he ended up doing really well?
A couple of them. There's one who's now a CEO of a mid-sized technology company that I interviewed for a CTO job many, many years ago. And I said, in my remarks, I had said, doesn't have the ability to lead. That was my so that is by far my favorite story. You get half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour at best to judge someone.
It's
You're
so
gonna
unfair, right?
you're gonna get some decisions wrong. In my I
We
teach
spend an
decision.
entire lifetime with our partner and not able to know them.
So I teach decision theory, Hital. I tell the
Yeah.
students, I said, in your life, you're gonna get 30 to 40% of your decisions wrong. Accept it. Now, hope that 30 to 40% bucket of wrong decisions doesn't include any
Hmm.
major big decision, right? And hope
Right.
that they fall on the right side of the equilibrium. But you will
Yeah.
get 30 to 40% of your decisions wrong.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. We're not
Yeah.
perfect. And so it's, you have these decisions, you also have the other side, right? You
Hmm.
think that person is absolutely fabulous
Yeah.
and you hire the person. And
Hmm.
then, the persona outside the interview room is a completely different persona. Right? So you have
Yeah.
your fair share of false positives and false negatives.
Very true. Okay, ready for some quick rapid fire?
Sure.
A book that you recommend the most?
I'm a John Grisham fan. I'm a Lee Child fan, so I'm a fiction reader.
Hmm.
Any of these authors, pick up a book and read it, you'll fall in love with fiction.
An advice which always remains with you.
Worry about what's in your locus of control.
What is the advice that you give more people?
Locus of control, stay on time. Every meeting is an interview. Dress well, and appearances matter.
A movie which highly inspired you? Or you can
Mm.
include a web series as well if you don't mind.
So I'm a old war movies fan. So Guns of
Hmm.
Navarone, Great Escape, Bridge on the River Kwai. I
Yeah.
love these movies. I think they tell a story about courage. They tell a story about
Yeah.
courage.
A travel destination which you are long been wanting to go?
You're gonna laugh, but it's the South Pole.
You will have to convince someone for that.
I've mapped out how many days it will take for me to get to there and what I need to get there. But
Mhm.
it's I don't know what fascination there is for me for the South Pole, but I just want to get to the South.
The immediate next goal that you are working towards?
So I'm setting up, or I'm in the midst of starting a retirement transition coaching practice. It's one of a kind. It's the non-financial aspects of retirement. So everyone sort
Right.
of, when you talk to someone and you say, when are you going to retire? And their answer is almost always when I have X amount of money. Right?
Yeah.
So people don't think about the social, psychological, physical, mental aspects of retirement.
Yeah.
And so my whole coaching practice is built around getting people to start to think about that aspect, because the money will remain, the money will stay, but how you're going to live your life is going to be absolutely key. And you're going to spend 30 years at the bare minimum in retirement.
So that's all I have today, Rajat. It's been fabulous having this conversation with you. A lot of thought provoking, a lot of heartwarming stories, and really impressed on what you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Hital, and thank you for having me on this show.
Great. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.